Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love these watches, if you love this watch, email Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions. Today, we are discussing a watch sold in 2003, made in extremely limited numbers, from Moritz Grossmann of Glashütte, Germany. This is the Bennu Power Reserve in stainless steel. It is a watch for which I excuse my fingerprints. The timepiece immaculately constructed with minimal bezel, maximal dial, a cambered crystal, a 41 millimeter diameter, a thickness of 11.6 millimeters, and then from lug tip to lug tip, 50.2 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. This timepiece is fairly large for a dress watch, not thick, not heavy or massive or awkward, just broad across the wrist. At over 50 millimeters, I could recommend this watch for a wrist of my size or larger. So my wrist is 16 centimeters circumference. There's your cuff shot. It'll easily slide underneath a dress cuff, but you can see the lugs really are sort of out to the edge of my wrist. So while it's a 41, it wears as a meaty 41 that really takes up all of the wrist. Here's your over-the-top shot, and then the strap, which you can see is a calf strap, and then on the bottom, a handmade custom Jean Rousseau Parisian strap, calf on both sides, a little bit of distressed texturing on the top, along with some bolstering to give it volume. We have a folded edge with a monotone stitch, no crimping, no gouging. This strap is brand new, and it's paired with a stainless steel Moritz Grossmann branded pin buckle. The case is beautiful, and again, I do excuse the fingerprints. I don't wear gloves in these videos because I don't want to slip when I'm holding the watch, nor do I want to struggle to manipulate the controls. So you'll have to bear with me, but you can see how beautifully made this case is. Look at the socket where the lugs were inserted into the case before being welded on. Look how sharp that break is. You can't achieve that using stamping and machining. This is the old school way of making a case. And you can see that there's a sort of concave to the lugs. The shape is complex, and then there's a soft bevel that expands as you move towards the case so that there's a complex faceting where the junction occurs. It's a really beautiful and subtle construction. You can also see that there's some sort of tumble home from the bottom of the case to the top. It rolls inward. The crown is unbranded in vintage fashion, and the bezel is super slim. As I mentioned earlier, from the front, the bezel is barely there. It's just a silver halo. The crystal is both boxed and cambered, anything but a default design, and probably quite pricey. You could see that there is a little release mechanism. This is difficult to explain, but it's easy to demonstrate. When I'm setting the watch, the crown is flush to the case. So you can see how precisely I'm able to set 3 o'clock. See that right there? Now, normally what happens on a watch, once you've set the time, you push the crown back in and the minute hand almost invariably jumps away from the carefully set station. Whereas here, you pull the crown out, it snaps back flush. So it's automatically in a setting mode. And then you can see how it's also hacked at that point. You press this button to re-engage the drive. So watch what happens to the seconds hand when I press the button now. See how stationary the minute hand was? The balance is back up and running. A brilliant and patented system exclusive to Moritz Grossmann. Now this watch appears to the casual eye as though it might be lumed, so let there be no doubt this is not a luminescent watch. What you're looking at is a dial that's made of sterling silver that is then galvanized black and printed with the distinctive features of the minutes and seconds, as well as the vertically arrayed Arabic numerals. There's a little bit of a countersink to the sub-seconds, which has a chemin de fer, or a railroad track. It also features a small counterweighted leaf-style seconds hand. And then we have these pike-style hands, or kite-style hands at center. And they are beautifully cut, manually finished, filled with a high ceram material. So that is a type of liquid ceramic that hardens. And then they are polished and ground down so that the high ceram matches the luminescent polish of the hand, but also so that they are perfectly flush to each other with zero bleed over. Beautifully made. The handcrafted, well, hands of Moritz Grossmann are a huge part of the appeal of the brand. One of the few brands that makes its own hands in-house. You can also see they're polished at center on a mirror-finished cannon pinion, and that the minute hand is a beautiful counterweight. Power reserve indicator up at the top of the dial. The manually wound power reserve on this watch is 42 hours, and you can see it transitions from red to silver white as you wind it up. It's a little bit like a diver down flag. Flip it all over, the movement, a work of art. Now, all this is 30 meters water resistant, so don't take it swimming, but as a stainless steel watch, it is more durable than your typical dress timepiece. First, note the size of the movement. Moritz Grossmann's a manufacturer, so it can build movements to fit their cases. It doesn't have to settle for what's available off the shelf. As a result, this movement is colossal. At 36.4 millimeters in diameter, it is almost as large as a Unitas 6498, which was originally designed for clocks and pocket watches, so it's that size. The bridges are all German silver, a nod to the types of watches that Moritz Grossmann, the man, would have made in his era of watchmaking. So a number of different elements here do call back to the 19th century era of watchmaking, 19th century and early 20th century heyday of East German watchmaking. So we have that German silver material, which is nickel, copper, and zinc, and the copper gives it that champagne hue. We have a three-quarter style bridge. We have a classical center wheel architecture where you have crown, crown wheel, ratchet wheel, center wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, which is attached to the second sand pinion, and then the escape wheel with the anchor and the balance. We also have a pillar construction. Today you see it almost exclusively on watches that reference vintage marine chronometers. So the French watchmaker Jean-Antoine Lepine in the 1760s created the Lepine style caliber, which, although you might recognize it from a certain format of pocket watch, is actually in reference to the idea of placing the bridges directly flush on top of the base plate, whereas prior to that, and for a long time later on marine chronometers, you would have a base plate, you would have bridges, and then there would be polished pillars holding them apart with the drivetrain in between. So if you look carefully, you can see that this three-quarter style bridge floats on pillars above the base plate. They're not flush to each other. This is one of the very few watches made today. I'd say the only others made in series really would be something like Chronometrie Ferdinand Berthoud, and exclusive to only a handful of brands, this pillar-style construction really references where watchmaking came from. Another element that harks to the past, you can see the freehand engraving of both the escape wheel cock and the balance cock. And because at most, Moritz Grossmann makes about 1/10 as many watches as a Lange und Söhne, the engraving on these structures can be much more intricate and time-consuming. And you could just see the density of the engravings and the fineness of the floral forms is greater here than on any Lange. You'll also appreciate that we have jewels set in chaton. Now, it's not necessary today, but these clear sapphires, rather than synthetic rubies, are set in golden chaton cups and then fixed by screws, because that's the way it would have been done in the pocket watch era, when it was not technically feasible to always precision set a jewel in a plate or bridge. There would be a precision golden cup made. The jewel would then be set into the cup would then be set into the bridge or plate and fixed using screws. You can see, though, there are not many bridges. There is mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges that are present. We have mirror finish on the fine adjustment index, which you can see is very subtly faceted about halfway down its length. There is mirror finish on the crown wheel core, as well as some of the screws. Other screws have been fired, but Moritz Grossmann doesn't use a generic blue firing. They actually apply a shorter firing to get these lovely violet-brown screws that are very distinctive of the brand. We have triple solarization on the ratchet wheel, and if you look carefully, you can see the teeth of all of these wheels in steel have been micro-beveled on their interiors. Very difficult to do. You can also see how luminescent the stripes are, as the stripes have been laid down by broad abrasive application. They have a wonderful luminous three-dimensional appearance. You can also see that while Lange has freehand engraving on balance cocks and the like, Moritz Grossmann has full freehand engraving. The letters, the characters, the numbers, all of this is done by hand with a burin, not by a drill or a laser or an engine. You can even see that the bridge for the escapement underneath the huge 14.2 millimeter in-house balance, that bridge features snailing and beveling. Also note the use of clear sapphires for the pallet stones of the anchor, and then an overcoil hairspring so that in every position, this watch keeps time evenly, isochronous they call it. And so not only do we have that overcoil, but we have a in-house manufactured free-sprung balance. On something like a MB&F Legacy machine perpetual, you'll have that huge 14 millimeter balance on the top. This is even bigger at 14.2 millimeters. You could see the balance screws and then the poising screws that are used to make the timing. For really fine timing adjustments, it's primarily operating as a free-sprung system, but for really fine adjustments, this screw-based micrometric regulator is used to fine-tune the movement before delivery, and you can see its scale has also been freehand engraved. Little details like the bridge holding this setting wheel, you could see that it's been satin finished on its top and beveled on its edge. We'll resume the operation there, but I'll also demonstrate how this system works from the bottom. You pull it out. My nails aren't quite as fearsome as they should be. There we go. You pull it out, and that's how it works. See, I'm adjusting the watch on the opposite side, and then I resume the operation. Pardon me, my apologies. This little ancillary wheel is part of the winding mechanism. You can also see the vintage-inspired, extensible, and black-polished click. This is a fantastic movement. 42 hours of power reserve, but it gets there in a beautiful fashion. If you love this watch, then you love what's great about German watchmaking, past, present, and future. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.